And hello, everybody. Welcome back to Phil at the Movies. I'm your host, Phil Walsh, and you're listening to another episode of this ongoing podcast series that is for the love of movies. Now, today I am going to be talking with a Spider-Man aficionado, maybe the best way to describe this gentleman. Spider-Man is certainly in the headlines lately. A number of the films have been re-released, and needless to say, Spider-Man is still very popular in the hearts and minds of general audiences and, frankly, movie-going people everywhere. The first two Sam Raimi films, as of this recording, have made over $2 million in their re-releases. So to say that people are not interested in Spider-Man comic book movies, I think that is certainly the understatement of the year. But today I am delighted to be welcoming first-time guest of the show, JJ Hodges, who is as I said, a bit of a Spider-Man fan, and he hosts the Spider-Man book club. And as I said, he's sort of the go-to expert, I think, when it comes to everyone's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So, JJ, first off, welcome to Phil at the Movies. Happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a topic that I know a little bit about.
Right.
I think I've seen those movies
Once or twice, right?
Yeah, But I mean, I got a whole podcast about it. I've seen the movies. I've read the books. Spider-Man's a gigantic part of my life.
Fair enough. It's sort of like me with Batman, and I get it.
Yeah.
So we're kindred spirits that way. Before we begin, JJ, if you want to do just a quick plug about the Spider-Man Book Club podcast, sort of give a rundown about it, and of course where people can find it.
It's called the Spider-Man Book Club. We talk about all of the Spider-Man comic books that have been coming out for the past 62 years at this point now. We go from whole arcs to just one-off issues to some of the more recent Marvel movies and also Marvel movie celebration. Because the comic books birthed the movies, and I love the movies. And this year, of course, is the 30th anniversary of Spider-Man, the animated series. So we're going to do a little plug here, do some episodes later this year about that, which I'm really excited about. It's all things Spider-Man, all things Marvel, and we keep a very positive, upbeat, excited tone, because if you're not talking about the things you're loving, you're just kind of sitting there, and that's no fun.
I co-sign that entirely. There's that line from the Elizabeth Olsen movie, Liberal Arts, and I won't get the quote exactly right, but it's basically, talk about what you love and stay quiet about what you don't. And I think those are words to live by, especially in today's world. So I definitely appreciate that 100%. So as I said, everybody, we're going to be talking about Spider-Man today. Certainly he's in the news, so to speak, and I think fair to say popular, more popular than ever, perhaps. JJ, seeing as you are the resident Spider-Man expert, let me just begin by asking, what is your Spider-Man story? How did you first become acquainted with the web swinger? And do you remember? Was it a comic book? Was it a TV show? A movie? Tell us how you first discovered your love and passion for Spider-Man.
It's got to go to the animated series, because I was about 7 or 8 when that first came out, and that just hit me at the right moment, where it was like, oh, Spider-Man's cool. And before then, because that was 94 and 92, we had X-Men and we had Batman. We were feasting pretty well as young millennials back then.
Eating good, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Spider-Man, there was just something really cool about the costume and swinging through the city, and I would go to the grocery store with my mom, and every now and then go down the magazine aisle, and they used to have the spinner racks, right? Grab a Spider-Man comic or a Marvel comic, and just really never lost interest. And I very frustratingly was reading entertainment news as a kid, and the wait to get a Spider-Man movie was was a long wait, you know,
Just a little bit.
as a fan. Yeah, well, it's like I never understood why a Spider-Man movie wasn't made when I always felt that Superman was much more complicated technical wise, and they pulled that off dozens of times, not just in the movies, but in several TV shows that have been out since. Um, and when we finally got the first Raimi Spider-Man, I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is it. We're here now. Like we made it, and having people not just in like the hallways at school, but people out in public talking about Spider-Man and Mary Jane and the Green Goblin. I was like, oh my god, this is the coolest thing in the world, and it's that just you can't recreate that nowadays, right?
No.
Um, with I hate the term superhero fatigue, so I won't use that. But superheroes are ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Everybody, when everybody knows who Deadpool is outside of the halls of Comic-Con, that's something else.
Right. No. It's a funny world we live in now. That is for
Yeah.
sure. Um, I guess you could say it's a comic book world. We're just living in it, and
Yeah.
and I, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some might have an issue with that, but that's okay. We won't
Yeah.
talk.
They'll get
We
over
won't talk about those people.
They'll get over
Exactly. All in a day's work. Yeah. No. I mean, I am by no means the Spider-Man expert that you are. My real introduction to the character. I mean, I knew about the animated show in the '90s and was familiar with the character, but my real introduction was the first Sam Raimi movie back in 2002, and I just remember being swept away by that film and just thinking it was so cool and exciting, and it was really unlike any other comic book movie I had seen up until that point. It just had a very vivid sort of color palette, and it felt larger than life. And I remember I sort of became a unofficial Spider-Man fan at that point. Though again, by no means am I any kind of an expert. I mean, as everyone has seen, I've had the Batman mug, so representing the home team tonight. But no, I have a soft spot for I mean the Spider-Man movies in general, but when it comes to those original Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi 3, those are near and dear to my heart. So any chance I can revisit or talk about them, you're gonna hear me perhaps go on and on too much at some point. But all right, let's just dive. Let's take a swing into this, shall we say? This is going to be an open-ended discussion, sort of stemming on all of the Spider-Man movies, but with an extra emphasis on Spider-Man: No Way Home, which. If you're listening to this episode now, by now this point, Spider-Man: No Way Home will have been re-released, so this will kind of coincide nicely with the re-release of that film, which is certainly, I think, fair to say a bit of a cultural milestone, not only for the character but really the comic book movie genre. I mean, it really does seem like that film changed everything in a lot of ways. I mean, we had all these, sort of explosion of multiverse and time traveling takes on superhero movies that followed in the wake of No Way Home. But I mean, I would say, and again, I come as someone, of course, who loves anything Batman related. No Way Home, I think, did it the best and did it with the most heart and sincerity. And I think that, again, just sort of speaks to the fact that we got to see, not only a great story, but the return of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, which was, I think, fair to say, one of the worst kept secrets in movie history up until that point. But
Very much.
yeah. So JJ, I'm going to turn it over to you. This is open mic right now. Give me your quick take, or it doesn't have to be quick, but your thoughts, your feelings on No Way Home.
When you say it's like the worst kept secret in Hollywood, that it's really funny because it's true. We all I think us in the know as people who are constantly on Twitter or whatever, we knew. Whereas maybe in the general audience there was a little bit more like, oh, will they, won't they, But then
Right.
again, maybe those things aren't as separate as we think they are. I don't know. But yeah, I just remember thinking my first inkling of it was actually the premiere, like 11 months earlier, the premiere, or not the premiere, but was WandaVision,
Mm.
which brought in Evan Peters. And then there's all the speculation, oh, this is how the X-Men are in the MCU, and, this is multiverse stuff, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately it wasn't, but although kind of weirdly, it was a preview of what they ended up doing. But that was the first inkling I remember having and thinking, and having heard some of those rumors, thinking, okay, well, if he's going to be in this, like this like random project, then Toby and Andrew, they got to be coming back, right? And I think Alfred Molina was kind of famously the first cat out of the bag, which I sort of I both love and hate the secrecy of movies. Like, I believe that keeping Toby and Andrew out of all the marketing was the smartest decision Marvel has probably ever made.
Agreed.
But at the same time, it's like, well, you can tell, like, we're hearing rumors that Jamie Foxx is in it. We're hearing, you know, we've seen set photos of Willem Dafoe. Like, give us a break here,
Yeah.
and luckily, I think they did a good job of keeping most of the movie's tricks a secret.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would argue the overall story, the idea that the reason Peter doesn't send them home is that they're all going to die. It was sort of hinted at in the trailers and done really well in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And that and when I say it's one of the best Spider-Man movies, if not the best Spider-Man movie, it's because of that. It's because Peter was like, they're here now and they need our help, so I'm going to help them. And they're all the bad guys. They've all tried to kill not him, but a Spider-Man, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, a couple of them tried to kill him, but it's like that
small details.
That really spoke to me just sitting there watching the film. And first of all, the de-aging on at least Defoe and Alfred Molina was excellent.
Yeah.
Really fantastic special effects. I mean, across the board with the film. And Jamie Foxx, I mean, he still looks like he's 25. So
right. I know.
he didn't really need any help there.
Right.
But I loved it that when the movie commits to the idea, like, okay, so that here's like the top of the third act, the hero is losing, the villains are winning. How do we get the hero motivated again? Well, in this movie, you bring back the characters that existed before in the other franchises. And that was, and I'll never forget, like, it literally started with the Matt Murdock cameo.
Oh, right. Yeah.
My theater erupted. And my cousin was sitting next to me and she turns to me and goes, "Is this really happening?" I said that a couple times because when they opened the first portal and they're like, Peter, and it's Andrew Garfield, as soon as he turned around, I was like, oh, that's him. That's really him. This is really happening.
It's happening.
After all these rumors and everything, it's finally happening. And then there's, Toby who comes in the other one. And I was like, and I don't know why, but I've never told anyone this, but my first thought after that scene was, that's it for them. That was it. That's the only purpose they served. I don't know why I thought that. But I was so like, well, that's all we're getting, isn't it? No, we got the whole rest of the movie with all of them together, bantering and talking to each other, and Peter one bragging about the Avengers and everything, and the other two going, what the hell does that mean? And it was just, just perfect from head to toe. And like legitimately, I left that theater going, I kind of can't believe they pulled it off. They pulled it off, bringing in those two characters. They don't overshadow the rest of the story, and they really added to it. They weren't just fan service cameos. Because let's face it, in X-Men Apocalypse, you could take the whole Weapon X scene out of the thing, and the movie still works. But as much as I hate to say it, the Wolverine bit was pure fan service, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
don't get me wrong, it worked, and I was all there for it.
No. Yeah, sometimes you can have a
But
little
it,
nostalgia. It's all good.
yeah, but in No Way Home, it's suddenly like, well, here are these other two Spider-Man that I'm in love with because I thought they both gave great performances, albeit extremely differently, but still true to the character.
Hmm.
And here they are interacting with the new Spider-Man, and it's not just this like meta joke of, "Hey, don't you look like Andrew Garfield?" or some silly thing like that.
Right. Right.
They were all Peter Parker, and they're doing like, he's like, "Hey, Peter, yeah, well, which one? No, yeah, we're all Peter Parker," like just pointing at each other, trying to do the meme. It's just me in my house, but it. I mean, really, nothing like that had. If it had happened before, and I'm sure it had, it wasn't successful. This was, and then a year later, I guess I was spoiled because I kept thinking, okay, or 2 years later, year and a half later, whatever. I was like, if Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton don't have a scene together, I'm going to be so mad leaving The Flash. And that wasn't the only reason I was mad leaving The Flash, but you know,
Yeah.
it's like that. This movie kind of spoiled it a little bit, right? Like, and I think as much as I love like Doctor Strange, right? Doctor Strange 2, we as film fans could tell instantly that all of those cameos were not filmed together.
No.
It was still really cool to see, but these three guys, they were there together, and it shows. Because I was a little worried about that. I was like, I wonder if they were only in a little bit of it because of COVID and stuff. But no, they were all there, and it was, I mean, it was the best surprise, and it came out right before Christmas, I believe. So it was a great Christmas that year, 2021. I've been
No.
talking like for like 95 minutes nonstop.
No. It's again, please. Yeah. This film, not to sort of jump on the Flash, because I mean I certainly have like a love-hate relationship with that movie as of late. But no, this to me is an example of how to do something like this where you're both leaning into the nostalgia, but you're also honoring what came before and having a meaningful contribution to the story. And I mean, it was just a perfect transition to have both Andrew and Toby return, and you really hit on something. They served a purpose to the story. This wasn't just, oh hey, look, there's the two guys from the early 2010 Spider-Man movies and the classic ones that you love. Like, I mean, they actually had a purpose, and everything sort of built onto another. Like even that little exchange when they're up on the statue, kind of waiting for things to go down. Like just like Toby's line to Andrew about, "Oh, you're amazing." Like, I mean, one kind of a nice
Yeah,
callback to the movie's titles, but also sort of like an in joke reference of like, yeah, no, you are amazing. Like, your version of the character is just as important. Your Spider-Man is just as important as as Tom's. Like, it's all part of the same great story. And like I said, nothing ever felt forced in a lot of
yeah,
ways. And I mean, you sort of touched on. I mean, the fact that you're getting Willem Dafoe, Alfred Molina, just to name two. I mean, Jamie Foxx being another. I mean, it certainly speaks to their performances that Marvel either didn't want to do other versions of these characters, or they've been done so well before that why top that. And I kind of like that. I know some people think, oh, they just should have gone for it at some point and introduced the MCU version of Doc Ock or Green Goblin. I'm like, no, like if you're going to have it call back to these other films, go with the OG. I mean,
yeah,
they're there for a reason, kind of a thing. But
yeah,
yeah, I remember seeing this back, sort of it's like the tail end of the pandemic, or as things were starting to get back to quote unquote normal. And it was just such a surprise, because even though, like you said, we knew the worst kept secret, it still is such an experience to see with an audience, and just to have that reaction of when they come through the portals. I mean, people went nuts. They just could not handle what was going on, and it's one of those moments where you kind of you remember where you are and you can't replicate it again. And I think that's
Yep.
kind of why all of the other films that have sort of pulled this trick, it falls flat in a way, because there's so much heart and sincerity with what was done here. But no, I'm with you. This is arguably one of the better Spider-Man films, if not, I could certainly understand if someone said this is the definitive one, because there's so much about the character that's present in this film. And I know sometimes people like to make the knock of, well, it took three MCU Spider-Man's movies to accomplish what they did in one movie, and in terms of telling an origin or whatnot. And like, I understand that certainly to a degree, but I think part of what makes these films entertaining and enjoyable is it's really the kind of the journey is as important as the experience, if that makes any sense. Like, it's not just,
Yep.
all right, let's just show the character's origin and move on. Like, everything built up to this moment. And I guess for you as sort of a Spider-Man fan, like, how did you feel going into this movie, given the previous two, Homecoming and No Way Home? Like, did you have any sort of like, all right, a checklist, like, I want this to happen, or were you just sort of like, I'm invested for the ride, let's see where this goes?
Definitely the latter,
Okay.
because I understand the arguments about the how Spider-Man was portrayed in the movies he's with Stark in the Avengers films and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I find that argument just to be just a little just nitpicky and silly, to the point where it's like, but they're getting Peter so right
Hmm.
that it's hard for me to be mad about it. Like, I mean, in Homecoming, when he lifts the debris off of him, the "Come on, Spider-Man" scene
Right.
is first of all lifted right from the comic books. It's a very famous comic book cover, of Spider-Man, like, kind of trapped under stuff. Um, but it's that kind of stuff that I was sitting there going, "Oh, this is Spider-Man,"
Hmm.
and there's he was called Iron Boy Junior and stuff like that, and none of that bothered me, because there's a section of the comic books, in the recent past, actually, where he was apprenticed to, well, maybe not apprentice to is the right word, but to Tony, and he had more stuff at his disposal because he was with Tony. There's even an arc where he's rich like Tony Stark is, and he can build all kinds of whatever. Um, so people going, "Oh, I don't like all that." I'm just like, it's all there though. The movies didn't make this up, or they're not trying to trick you or anything. Um, my only complaint about the original films, or the MCU films, I should say, is that they very rarely, if ever, filmed actually in New York. So,
Oh
and
yeah.
there's a very big sense. I know the second one is all over the country, in the in Europe, and there they actually film, so it makes more sense.
Right.
But with the New York stuff, I'm like, New York is so important to Spider-Man in
Mm.
general, that those films, that's the only thing they didn't capture to me, was the magic of New York that the Raimi and the Mark Webb films did. Like, especially Amazing Spider-Man 2, that filmed exclusively in New York State, at least.
Hmm.
Not a lot of it in New York City, but not all of it, of course.
Right.
Um, like, believe it or not, that Times Square set, that's a set. But it's just one of those things that I was more upset with how Peter was treated in Spider-Man 3 than how he was treated by the MCU. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's like this seems off-brand for the character, as opposed to
Right.
him being kind of inspired by Tony Stark, which, let's face it, like, makes sense in the story they were telling, right?
Right.
Um, but like you were saying, they built up to all that, and weirdly, without even meaning to, they built up to Peter and Tony being mentor and mentee. Because there was the fan theory that in Iron Man 2, you've heard that, right? The one little boy that
Oh,
watches
with the
Iron Man.
kid. Yeah.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
Iron Man 2, they think he's the
Yeah, I
Um,
remember hearing about that. Yep, that's
yeah,
right.
they think that's Peter, and Kevin Feige was like, I kind of like that. Sure, why not?
Right.
And it's stuff like that that I love, you know. Um, but again, it's this. I went in from, I mean, from Civil War to this. I was in on it. I was like, um, like probably how you are with Batman, and I am too. I'm a huge Batman fan. I think, well, Batman, you know, you can kind of have these different versions of Batman, and it all works.
Right.
Um, and even Batman and Robin has a soft spot in my heart. The movie's ridiculous
No.
and legitimately just a bad movie, but I still have fun watching it.
Yeah.
And I was just rewatching Spider-Man 3 with my daughter the other day, and I was like, for as much as this movie bugs me with some of the choices it makes, I'm still having fun watching it.
Yeah, so yeah, that to me is kind of my big takeaway is if you have that sincerity, that's all that matters. And
Mhm.
you know, while again my heart is certainly there with the original three, I can't deny that there is love and care to all of the MCU Spider-Man films. And again, each one sort of builds onto the other, where you finally get to the to No Way Home. And you know, Tom really feels well rounded as his own version of Peter Parker and Spider Man, and I mean, it's a wonderful moment, particularly once we get to spoiler alert, everybody, he's on his own and he makes
Right.
that hero's sacrifice, which is very Spider Man, and I remember reading somewhere someone's like, oh, he never has a moment where he really becomes Spider Man. I'm like, folks, did you watch the movie? Like, that is Spider-Man right there. Like, that's the lesson from the first film, the second film, from the Andrew Garfield films. Like, he will sacrifice his own happiness, his own sort of well-being in order to protect others and those around him. And I mean, that doesn't get more Spider-Man than that. I mean, by the end of it, he's got the crummy apartment. Like, I mean, he's on his own. Like, it's all the trappings are right there. It may not be,
Yep.
carbon copy or whatnot, but I mean, it's it's like what George Lucas says. It's poetry. Everything rhymes.
And I think that's what makes the movie work is that when they have that moment where Peter, kind of tells Strange, like, you make everybody forget me, it
Yeah.
it's believable because we've seen him be so selfless the whole film.
Yeah.
Even when his whole world collapsed around him and he was really about ready to kill the goblin, he didn't.
Mm.
He stopped himself. Um, and my I'm sure Zaki Hassan. He and I have had a few conversations about Spider-Man over the years. He's been on the show a couple times, and he said that, well, our heroes shouldn't just inspire us; they should be aspirational.
Mm.
We should want to be more like that. And I think that Spider-Man does that extremely well because you can have a little bit of both in kind of a fun way where he can reject his powers and want to just live a normal life, but knows better than that and is going
Right.
to ultimately make the right decision. Whereas would you or I be strong enough to quote unquote make the right decision? Who knows?
No.
And hopefully we never have to find out.
Right. No. Hopefully, we're never confronted with a multiversal crisis or whatnot. I mean,
Right.
if portals start opening up, then all hell is going to break loose, I guess,
Oh,
and
I'm
then we'll
I'm
find
I'm
out.
going the other way. I'm running the other way.
Honestly, it's part of the bad idea in a lot of ways. Um, One of the things that I particularly like about this film, and I'm sure you've noted it in the past, is that when we meet Toby and Andrew's versions for the first time, I like how both of them are sort of representative of where they are vis-a-vis their Peter Parker Spider-Man alter ego. When we see Andrew, like you said, he's in the costume. When we see Toby's Peter for the first time, he's in plain clothes, and he quick to whip into his web swinging action, but it just was sort of a nice little detail that shows like, okay, Andrew is still very much conflicted or trying to find that balance. And clearly Toby's version, I mean, he says it, he's trying to do better, but even then, like, it seems like he has his life together and he's found that balance, and kind of shows to Tom's version, like, these are ultimately the two paths, and kind of where you can go if you go down one extreme, or maybe not an extreme in the other, but another path, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's such it's such a great observation, and it was obviously deliberate on the
Yeah,
filmmaker's part that Andrew shows up as Spider-Man and Toby shows up as Peter Parker.
yeah,
Um, and I like, also, I think that a very smart choice on the filmmaker's part, and Toby and Andrew contributed to this, twofold really, was that they're their ages now, so they're not like aged down to the last time they
right,
fought
right,
whatever, the goblin or lizard or whatever. Um, but they also don't give a lot of backstory in between, after Spider-Man 3 or after Amazing 2, right?
hmm
They touch on stuff a little bit, and I think that was genius on the filmmaker's part. And again, I'm including Toby and Andrew, because apparently they were big on, like, well, let's not, like, fill in with all our stories or whatever. Um,
right,
because again, they're I think they realized the same way that the filmmakers were realizing, if they start going on, if Toby goes, oh my gosh, one time Doc Ock came back to life and took over my brain and I was living in his body or something, or
yeah,
reference other comic books or whatever, it would have just overshadowed the rest of the movie, and that's not their movie anymore. They're there
bingo,
in service of Holland's Spider-Man, right?
yeah, bingo. Now that's the thing, and that's what I think I probably appreciate the most about this film, is that it doesn't go overboard. I mean, it would have been very easy to lean into the fan service and have Toby or Andrew riff on X number of monologues and talk about their past adventures. But like you said, that would pull you out of the movie, and you'd be thinking, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, wait a minute, when are we going to get to see those stories? And when is that going to happen? And it was very smart to just keep it confined to this particular event, because they service the story fantastically, and again, it all sort of
Yep.
helps in building up Tom and his version of the character, and sets it off to wherever he may go in some future entry, which I'm sure is going to happen um,
Yep.
down the road. Um, in addition to No Way Home, I mean, certainly we can touch on it more if you'd like, but was there ever a Spider-Man film that, let's say, didn't quite meet your expectations, or was there one that you're like, I guess, which one do you revisit the least? That may be a good way to start.
This will definitely surprise people, because I've kind of had this quote unquote hot take discussion before.
All right.
So it's uh, if I'll put it this way: if I had to choose between the Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, I'd pick Amazing 2. Like, 3 just was it was sort of, I guess, in a way, probably how people of a generation before us felt when they saw the Phantom Menace, right? They were expecting this amazing Star Wars film and got this thing instead. Um, but for me, I was the right age for Phantom Menace, so I loved it. I
Right.
still love it.
Right there,
Um,
brother.
yeah, and whereas I think Spider-Man 3, because I was such a big fan of the animated show,
hmm
they were doing Venom, and they, in the special, just in the trailers, the way the Sandman looked, he looked amazing.
hmm
I was like, oh, this is going to be one for the ages. There's no way this movie's going to be bad. I remember thinking that, like, all the way from, like, the first teaser trailer I saw summer 2006,
hmm
before Superman Returns,
Okay. Yep.
because that's just how it was back then. There was
Yeah.
no YouTube to.
Yeah.
I mean, there was, but it wasn't like it is now.
Right.
Which you can figure out all that stuff by tracking, like, the Lonely Island success on Saturday Night Live,
Right.
when YouTube became a huge thing, was around the same time. Um, but yeah, Spider-Man 3 just, like I said, I enjoy watching it. I have fun, but there's so much of it that just annoys the crap out of me, that you know the story, what the story should have been, and what apparently the story was going to be, was the Sandman and the Vulture having some begrudging alliance that they made in prison, and they were, you know, going to do some crime spree. But then again, it's like the movie shot itself in the foot because, well, we have to finish this, you know, this Goblin story with Harry.
Right.
You know, we have to, you know, not just that, but you know, it's a trilogy, so we got to have a big twist in it somewhere, right? You know, so let's say Sandman killed Ben Parker. And not only that, but the producers really want Venom in the movie, so we'll find a way to put him in the movie. And it's you know, as much as Venom should have been like a Sam Raimi classic, he doesn't like the character, so he couldn't figure out how to do it. And another hot take: Topher Grace, not a bad choice, just wasn't given the best material. I think he would have been a really fantastic Eddie Brock if he had had a better script. And I'm probably one of two people who thinks that, the other one being Sam Raimi, because Topher Grace, if you hear interviews with him, he does not think that. But yeah, you know, it's like the movie was strangely a victim of its own success, but then also, oddly, it was sort of that kind of Warner Brothers-y lesson that they learned. Well, if we're so successful, that means we got to keep being successful. Right. And the way to do that, logically, would be to let the filmmaker do what he's doing, and he's going to deliver something great. But no, we have to put in another successful thing, which is Venom. Doesn't fit, you know? And, you know, and it's sort of funny that Venom is in No Way Home, or, like, not really, actually. You know,
right, yeah.
The post-credit scene. And even then, just sort of feels like that was like a favor to Sony. Like, well, at least we can say we did it. And you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't Disney's first thought. Because how else do you fit him into the story? Maybe you could have, but I don't know. I'm very salty about the way Venom has been portrayed on film since 2007. I'm still not happy at all with the recent stuff.
No, I mean, there is a point to be made that I think they really don't know what to do with that particular character. It's sort of like, let's just throw anything at the wall and see if the black goop sticks, so to speak. You know, which, I mean, again, there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. Yeah, but I will say, because I'm probably, you know, one of the few like staunch defenders of Spider-Man 3. I've always had a soft spot for it, though I can acknowledge there are some choices in the film which are, you know, questionable and whatnot. I do think the film would have benefited, strangely enough, if they had gone the route of making it in two parts. I know that would, you know, contradict a trilogy, but I think there was just there is so much stuff in there, and there's not enough time to breathe, so to speak, that I think an extra film might have remedied all of that, and you know, maybe given a more cohesive story. But I mean, you know, what's done is done, obviously, and it, you know, it lives on, you know, for better or for worse, in infamy. You know, certainly is the subject of memes and different jokes online. But I have to
agree with you, by the way. Sorry to interrupt, but
no,
I do agree with you. Because I had heard that they spent $250 million making it, which is astronomical money anyway. But for 2000,
oh yeah, back then, yeah,
that was way more. So I was like, oh, it's got to be two movies. They're not spending all that on one movie.
No.
And here we are, how many years later? And how much did James Cameron spend on two movies? Yeah, he's doing okay, but still,
it's only money, I guess. No, it's crazy. It's amazing. I mean, it's wild that, you know, the price tags keep going up and up and up, and, you know, sometimes the quality doesn't, you know, match that. But
right.
That's for a topic for another day. I put it to you, you know, again, being the resident Spider-Man expert, because certainly there's been a lot of chatter, particularly since No Way Home, and I mean, even before that, I mean, Spider-Man 4 was going to happen. It was in you know, quote unquote development before it wasn't. And, you know, every so often we hear whispers, or, you know, I don't even want to call them rumors, but more of, you know, maybe wish casting, or people openly talking about what if or what could happen. Would you want to see? I guess I'll put it this way: would you ever want to see a continuation and be like a Sam Raimi Spider-Man 4? Would you want to see a continuation of Andrew Garfield Spider-Man in their own sort of spin-off films? Or do you think leave well enough alone and continue with what seems more likely a Spider-Man 4 with Tom Holland?
These are movies that I really enjoy, and I was craving a Spider-Man 4, back then, and then we got the rebooted Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield, and I was excuse me, craving Amazing Spider-Man 3, um, and but now there's all sorts of talk and everything, and it comes up on how many interviews, how many times did Kirsten Dunst try to sell the movie Civil War and was just inundated with Spider-Man questions? Poor girl.
Right.
But would I like to see those? Absolutely. But I'm firmly in the camp that it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd like instead is some sort of. I'd much prefer them kind of stay where they are as like supporting characters and have a Spider Verse live action film like based on the comics, and therefore get Emma Stone as Spider Gwen,
Right, right.
and even and you could bring back John Mulaney as Spider Ham too. So,
There you go.
but it's we if we don't get, I mean, we're getting a Spider-Man 4. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I just worry about it being it just being like by the end of the movie, Ned and MJ remember Peter and everything's fine again. That, I don't know. I'd feel like we need a movie of Peter being angry and depressed, that nobody remembers him and he's all alone, and then by the end of it he's like, I'm ready to go find my friends and remind them who I am, or something like that. You know what I mean? Because it just. But then again, they could make us one more Spider-Man and he dies at the end of it. I don't know.
Right. No, I mean, the sky is the limit in more ways than one. I tend to think you're right that if we ever do see Toby and Andrew again, it will be in some supporting capacity. I mean, hell, I would love nothing more than to have Sam Raimi and company return and do a proper Spider-Man 4. But I know that's probably not likely to happen, but B, it's one of those double-edged swords where, be careful what you wish for, kind of a thing. And I mean, not saying that, if they all did come back, I would think there probably would be a story that would justify it, but at the same time, it's sort of one of those things where so much time has passed, and then it's sort of the question, well, what is the point of this? Like, I mean, is it just like a one and done, and then we don't talk about it, or again, or if it is successful, does that mean you do a Spider-Man 5? Like, it's sort of it opens up Pandora's box, and I think it's almost better just to have that wild speculation rather than to get down into the nitty gritty, because again, who knows what could happen. And the last thing I would want to see is drive the character into the ground that way, and then
Right.
that's the memory people have. Forget Bully McGuire, as the meme is called, or the dancing good Toby. Let maybe leave well enough alone sometimes. But no, I think you make a good point about the very likely Tom Holland Spider-Man film, because I think we need to see this version of Peter at his lowest, so to speak. I mean, we've certainly got moments of that in No Way Home, but I think a film where he is trying to figure out who he is, trying to figure out his purpose in life. What's it like to just be Peter Parker, anonymous? I hope that is the direction they go, because I think there's a lot of potential for for stories and kind of growth with the character. I mean, whether we get that, that's the $50 million question. I mean, to me, I think it's too easy to just go to the route. Oh, everything's all happily ever after in the first 15 minutes. Like you have to
Yeah.
put the character on the runner, so to speak, in order to sort of justify a story, as opposed to just sort of checking the box and like, oh, we accomplished this. All right, now let's introduce this version of Venom. Like, there's got to be more of a tug of war, I think, than just sort of, all right, let's just dump everything here and see what fits. I'm a big believer in let the sort of the story marinate, let things grow organically rather than trying to force it. And I think it's actually wise that they're waiting as long as they are. I mean, again, there's been obviously a lot of other things that have happened in between, strikes and hangover from the pandemic, and just the whole
Yeah.
rights issue with Spider-Man, with Sony and Marvel, and the bidding wars and whatnot. But I honestly think time is almost a great thing with these kind of movies, and particularly with the way the last film ended. You sort of build that speculation and anticipation, and then you reintroduce the character, kind of at the right moment. And I don't think there'll ever be a time. I mean, I say that I'll probably jinx myself, but I think Spider-Man is certainly one of, if not the most popular comic book superhero, and so I don't think he'll ever go out of fashion or out of style. I mean,
No.
the Spider-Verse movies certainly speak to that, and that's in an animated form. So I think the public is not going to grow tired of Spider-Man anytime soon. But
No,
you did mention the no. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, yeah, Spider-Man and Batman, are sort of superhero fatigue proof.
Yeah,
They,
thank God.
because even the least grossing Spider-Man film was, I mean, I don't have like all the numbers in front of me, but when you think about like how these movies were going, and Amazing Spider-Man 2 made $700 million, it was considered a flop.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? It's just like it's one of those weird Hollywood math things. But that goes to but that shows you that's still a gigantic number of people who went to go see that movie, took their kids to go see that movie. And how many of them were a little bit older, seeing Garfield come back
right.
in No Way Home, and that in no small way contributed to that film's success. And it's just like Spider-Man and Batman, they're my two favorite guys here. They never seem to have a problem making money at the box office. Even Batman and Robin was a successful movie. Um, like probably the least successful, ironically, was probably Batman Begins, but because it got such good word of mouth and DVD sales went through the roof, and that's when Warner Brothers was like, "All right, I guess we're going to make another one," like because that wasn't a sure thing back then. But um, glad we did, because we got Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises, and and with Spider Man, people are still showing up. Oh, we cast a new Spider Man, so what? There's a new James Bond every few years. We're fine. You know what I mean? Like
That's right.
it's a weird thing where Marvel is simultaneously okay with changing things up and also stuck in the past in a weird way. Like, oh, we can recast Spider-Man every couple of years, but we'll never recast Wolverine.
Right. No, that's actually a very interesting point, because yeah, there is that sort of like, no, we can't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But yet, we've had three Spider-Man, and
Sure.
there's going to be more. There's it's inevitable at some point. Yeah, it is bizarre
Right.
that they can't sort of reconcile those differences. I mean, we could have a whole separate podcast on Marvel and the decisions that have been made over there over the years. But
Yeah.
you had mentioned about the Spider Verse, and particularly um, as it relates to sort of you know other Spider Men and kind of the whole world building. Uh, Speak about the two Spider Verse films, because I think it's fair to say, I mean, one, they were huge successes, but that was a gamble in a lot of ways that I'm not sure a lot of people thought at the time would work? Like, could you do it in animation? Could you do a character that's only really been in the main audience's eyes as a live action format? And yet, I mean, both these Spider-Verse films are considered by many to be, some of, if not, the definitive, Spider-Man movies. And that's, impressive in its own right, given that they are, animated films. And not to knock animated, but it's just sort of amazing that these, two little engines that could are now, widely regarded as some of the best Spider-Man material out there. So, if you want to speak to those two, feel free to go
Oh,
ahead.
I mean, that could be a whole other
I know.
conversation.
That's a whole podcast in and of itself.
But it's I think, well, this will never happen. One of the smartest things that I think that those films did is that everyone that they cast behind the scenes could play them in live action. I mean, Jake Johnson would be an amazing, like, jaded older Peter Parker.
Right.
Shamik Moore, I mean, he's older now, but he'd still be great as Miles Morales.
Yep.
If you just age him up a little bit. And it's funny because I struggle with that when people talk about, like, the definitive Spider-Man movie, and a lot of times they'll give it to No Way Home. And the only reason I probably wouldn't give it to these movies is because it's almost like it's cheating, because it's like 5 Spider-Man as opposed to like one Spider-Man having his due or something. But I also think that those movies, I mean, excuse me, when you have talents like Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who, I mean, if you've ever seen Clone High, it's a freaking hilarious, kind of a before its time, hilarious show. I haven't seen the reboot, but the show as it came on back then was hysterical. And then their 21 Jump Street movies are surprisingly great movies. And then, of course, there's the Lego movie. So when, like, they were announced as being a big part of, or as making an animated Spider-Man movie, I was like, oh, okay, well, that'll be cool. And I think what those movies get to do that the live action movies don't get to do, and only slightly because of CGI still can't do a lot of stuff, I guess, is how well they bring in all the other characters. But the thing they can get away with in animation that you wouldn't be able to get away with in live action is that it's just bonkers and silly and makes absolutely no sense. But it's fine. You can get away with that in animation, not necessarily in live action, unless, like, everybody's taking considerable. Everybody just hams it up or camps it up or whatever, which I would not like.
Right.
But these movies can be sincere and have a really wonderful emotional reality to them while telling this off-the-wall fantastical story, But let's boil it down to, well, this kid is growing up and he feels all alone in the world, and then he meets people like him, And then in the second one, he gets invited to this party of like-minded people, gets to the party, and the party sucks,
Irony.
Yeah. Well, that's how Lord and Miller described it. So it's so that's not me making that up, but and all of that is true to Spider-Man, because Spider-Man is a normal person. Like Bruce Wayne is like the richest man on earth. So despite all the talk of, oh, he's great because he's a human being, I'm like, not really, but Spider-Man gets to go through, like, really normal stuff, and sometimes that normal stuff has this heightened reality to it, like in the Spider-Verse films. And those films really succeed in just embracing the bonkersness of it, because the story they're telling is a real story. So it doesn't matter all the crazy stuff that's going on. That's just dressing. Because I didn't walk out of Into the Spider-Verse going like, wow, all that multiverse stuff was cool. I went going, wow, like, they really nailed Miles Morales. Like, they nailed those characters, And then and then the second film, just blending all these animation styles. I mean, incredible.
Oh yeah.
Visually stunning, but the story is still fantastic. And I'm still mad that they didn't win Best Picture.
Yeah, that was a crime. Honestly, that's a crime against humanity right there.
Yeah.
No, I always say this because, I mean, certainly my preference in any format, any film, is always live action. I just think there's so much more you can do with that versus animation. But to me, the mark of a great animated film is that it makes you forget you're watching an animated film.
Yes.
And with both of these movies, particularly with the second one, which is even much more fantastical in terms of the visual representation, um, I never thought I was watching an animated movie. Like, and again, I'm not saying that to knock animation, but I mean that's how powerful these two films are, that they can make you forget what you're watching is just some colorful drawings, to put it bluntly. And it's you get swept up in this whole world and this whole story because the characters are so real and the
Yeah.
emotions are not half baked. Everything is there with a purpose and meaning. And yeah, I mean it's riveting stuff. And then you throw in all the incredible visuals. I mean, again, the second one is like a comic book come to life. It's
Yeah.
absolutely stunning. I mean, and I'm still amazed at what they were able to accomplish with it, and it never feels cheesy or sort of like that. Again, I hate to keep sound like I'm going after animation, but like that over the top quality that sometimes
Like
you
cartoony.
yeah, that's the word. Yeah, it
Yeah.
never felt like a joke.
Yeah.
Everything felt sincere, and again, like this were a live action film. And that's, again, that's a testament to the performances, but also just the care that they put into each and every film. So
Mhm.
I rank these very highly in terms of sort of my Spider-Man pantheon, and just as like great pieces of that word again, cinema, which is I think a fair descriptor when it comes to of both Spider-Verse films. But yeah,
Yep.
yeah, they're top drawer to say the least. Um, to sort of tie everything together here, do you have a favorite Spider-Man movie actor? Is there, and again, that's sort of a loaded question, I know.
It is, and I'm gonna have to give you the cop out
That's
answer,
okay.
where I'd say that the three of them, the three Peters, but I also think for very different reasons. I think that Andrew was the funniest as Spider-Man,
Hmm.
reminding me of the animated series. He was very funny, um, and Toby had kind of that awkward, nerdy innocence,
Yep.
whereas Tom Holland, you know, I mean, I was joking about this with my sister the other day. I'm like, I went to go see, as of this recording, the first two Spider Man are out in movie theaters. I think the third one came out
Yeah,
today.
that's today. Yeah.
Yeah, that's today. Okay. So my daughter and I went to the first one, and we were sitting there, and not that it had been a long time since I watched it, but maybe just seeing it on the big screen. I don't know. Either way, my brain was working differently, and I went, Toby Maguire looks like he's 30 years old in this high school. Like they did not do a good job of making them look younger. Um, whereas uh, Andrew and Emma were about the same age, 10 something years later when they made their movie. You know, I don't know. Maybe it helps that Emma has a little bit of a baby face, so she at the time still looked high schoolish, right? Um, whereas like Tom Holland and his cast, they all look like they're right out of high school. They're all baby faced.
Right.
So they have that kid quality. So when
Sure.
Peter gets upset, and I think it's such a good scene in Homecoming when he's talking to Ned in the hotel room, and he's like, he just keeps treating me like I'm a kid, but I'm a kid who can lift buses, and I can do this and I can do that, and he's like jumping on the bed talking about it. It's like, look how great this is. This is like, this 15, 16-year-old just going, I want to be treated like an adult, even though he's
And
jumping on a bed like a little, like a little brat.
he's got his Legos in the corner. So
Yeah, but yeah, so I think all of them for different reasons. And like I said, Jay Johnson being kind of the older, jaded Spider-Man.
mm,
Which, side note, I haven't seen it yet. I will see it at some point, but it'll piss me off to no end that Madam Web cast Andrew Scott and did not cast him as a Peter B. Parker. Because tell me he wasn't going to be a great,
Yeah,
like, jaded, older, pissed off Spider-Man.
yeah. That was a. I mean, there was a lot of missed opportunities with Madam Web, but that would be one of the. Again, could do a whole
Because
separate podcast on
yeah,
that.
if I were to cast anybody of any age to play Peter Parker, my first thought would have been Adam Scott. Like, oh my gosh, he'd be amazing. You know,
Yeah, that's
like he
right at the
can
central
do,
casting.
yeah. Whether you're doing it 40 something years old like he is now, or even if they were to do an animated, I would cast him.
I could see
But I, but I digress. But yeah,
it.
so a little bit, all of them. I'd probably default to if I had to default to one, I'd probably give the edge to Andrew just because
Oh, well.
I thought he captured the because I'm a huge fan of the Ultimate Spider-Man comic books,
Mhm.
and I thought he captured the humor and the angst really really well,
Hmm.
and those books were all about that. So, so
Good.
there's my super long-winded answer.
Hey, that's
There.
okay. We big supporter of long-winded answers on this show. My listeners can attest to that. Yours truly is guilty of it many times. No, I respect that. To drop that Norman Osborn line, I respect that. Um, no, I mean for me, and I've probably have indicated this on the show before, so it probably won't surprise many of you. But Toby is still my Spider-Man. He just,
Yeah.
I think what it is, he was, it's like for many people, like with Michael Keaton, being Batman for the first time. There's just something about uh, the first guy to do it, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you can find great moments in all the other performances from Andrew to Tom, and again, each one really does their own thing with it and sort of builds on the other. But again, I was rewatching the original one a few weeks back, and there's just something about Toby's Spider-Man. It just I can't seem to shake him, all these years later. But nostalgia is a powerful is a powerful thing. I will tell you that. But
But it's also, at least it's not wrong though. At least you're not
no,
going, oh, I still love Toby, and it's like we're talking about like Halle Berry Catwoman.
Right?
Come on,
No,
you know what I mean?
bingo. No, like you're not going to hear me make that argument. Oh no, George Clooney is my favorite Batman. No, you won't hear that. No disrespect to anyone that loves George Clooney as Batman, but I think that's yeah. We're not going to get into that kind of silliness here. Lord knows that. Before we wrap this up, JJ. Again, don't mean to put you on the spot again, but what would be your top three Spider-Man movies? I think No Way Home probably would fall into one of them, but uh, you know, give us your top three overall.
That's actually a lot easier.
Okay.
In no particular order,
Sure.
I would say No Way Home,
Hmm.
Spider-Man 2, which rewatching with I rewatched that with my daughter. We didn't go to the movie theater for that one, and I don't think she really cared for it much. But also at the same time, she's 5 and she's got like a million toys that she's playing with, so I don't know how much she was paying attention.
Give it
Um,
time.
yeah, but yeah, so No Way Home, Spider-Man 2, and Across the Spider-Verse, because that's one that
Nice.
I do rewatch constantly, and a big part of it is it's a very visually amazing film to watch, but the visuals highlight this incredible story. Right at the beginning with the Gwen story is so well done,
Hmm.
and I just wish we'd gotten more of Jack Quaid as Peter because he was also great, right?
Oh yeah, that's
Um,
right. That's
you know,
right.
and but then No Way Home, and this is the joke I make about No Way Home, where I was like, if you really think about it, the plot to No Way Home makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It is 100% fan service the movie, but because they did such a good job with it that you don't even notice. I didn't even realize it till like 2 years later. I was like, oh wait a minute, that movie technically doesn't make any sense. Because why would Doc Ock know his identity and come through? Wait, no, Electro didn't know his identity. But why are the Spider-Men their own ages as opposed to being younger? Not a lick of sense. But it genuinely doesn't matter because you, the movie buys into it 100%. The characters are buying into it, so we're buying into it. You know, uh, and I'm hoping that Deadpool and Wolverine can be a similar situation. But you really, that's where I give credit to for that film, because I'm like, Across the Spider Verse, let's just great story, amazing visuals. Spider-Man 2, great story, and really a very poignant superhero story. Like, here's a hero who's like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
Hmm.
And then has to relearn how to, you know, or not necessarily relearn how to be a hero, but like be reminded why he needs to be a hero. You
Right.
have that Aunt May scene that's amazing. And then you have No Way Home, which is all of that and a little bit more, which is kind of amazing.
That's that's beautiful, man. That's well said. Honestly, I
Well, thank you.
no. I mean that you really captured, I think, all the different sort of tones and tenures, if you will, of all these Spider-Man films. And I could certainly respect anyone that says we've never had a quote unquote bad Spider-Man movie. Like everyone has really sort of built on the other, and each one has a story and kind of a purpose to say. I mean, and for me, I mean, I certainly have a lot of preference for the original three. Again, sort of my introduction to the Spider-Man character was through Spider-Man 2002 and the subsequent
Mhm.
sequels. I mean, those are going to be very near and dear to my heart. I mean, if I had to rank a top three, I mean, I know one and two it would be Spider-Man 2, the original Spider-Man, and then depending on which day of the week it is, three could either be Spider-Man 3, but I could also put No Way Home in there. Like again, depending which day of the week, or whatnot, how the temperature is,
Yeah.
again, but each one has its own point, and they're all a great representation, I think, of such a cool and exciting character that, I mean, as you said it earlier, is kind of an embodiment of the audience. Like everybody can
Yeah.
relate to Spider-Man. You can't necessarily relate to Superman, but you can. Everyone's been a teenager. Everyone's been to high school. Everyone knows what it's like to try to figure out your place in the world, and Spider-Man does that across every film, every interpretation. So he's a character that I don't think we're gonna get bored with anytime soon. I mean, certainly as the re-release numbers have been at the box office, I think the public is clamoring for more Spider-Man. So I expect that an announcement has to be forthcoming any day now for whatever the next adventure is.
Oh, I'm certain of that. I've heard rumors that Sydney Sweeney is going to be Black Cat in it. I don't think that's true, especially right after the
Yeah,
bomb of
a little
Madame
too
Web.
close.
However, she would be a great choice,
Right.
so I'll at least give her that. But yeah, I mean, it says something that on a Monday night, I went to the movie theater with my kid, and it was half full for a
Yeah.
movie that you can watch. You could just do a free trial on Disney Plus and then cancel
Right.
it. Or the DVDs are in the bins at Walmart, right?
Yeah.
It says a lot that people were still willing to come to the movie theater for that. And there's very few movies I'm willing to do that with. I did it for Ghostbusters in the 35th anniversary,
Hmm.
um, and gonna do it, in a week or two for the Phantom Menace when that comes out. Because there's something about Star Wars on the big screen; it's just perfect.
Bingo. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's just a few movies every now and then when they're announced as being back in the movie theater. Batman '89 is one of them. I'm like, yeah, I want to see that because there's something special about the movie theater, but also it's a whole different experience.
Right.
I can't speak to everyone, but I think our generation, especially growing up, like I don't touch my phone. I don't feel the need to. It's like if I have to go to the bathroom, I'll hold it.
Right.
Like being at the theater, like that's something special.
Right.
you know.
Right.
And maybe just now as an adult, and it's like $30 a pop.
Right.
But for tickets and popcorn and all this stuff, and then having the kid on top of it.
Right.
But seriously, it's like, and then I watch how she reacts to it. We saw Little Mermaid last year. Every time they had a musical number, she jumped up and like tried to get closer to the screen. It's stuff like that where I'm going, this is why the movies are special. Going to the movie theater is special, and sure, I'm joking about like, oh wow, Toby looks really old in this movie, but at the same time, it's like it didn't ruin the experience for me. Knowing how the movie goes, I could karaoke it, for crying out loud. None of that ruins it. I'm sitting there going, I'm so excited to be here right now because it takes me back to May 2022 or 2002, I should say. I was going to say 2002.
Right.
And I was going to say 2022. All that was wrong. Anyway, it takes me back to that opening night when it's like it just wasn't like it was back then. There were magazines and stuff. Internet was not really much of a thing in terms of like movie trailers and stuff. So I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
And it's just, like you said before, that nostalgia is a powerful thing.
No, it is, and I think it's why we're always chasing it, time and again. And again, not every film, especially one that sort of recirculates, can tap into that into that sentiment. But there's something about the Spider-Man films in general. I mean, you said it perfectly. 2002, it was everywhere, and I can't imagine something like that ever happening again. I mean, even when I think back to No Way Home from a few years ago, yeah, that was a huge event and people saw it, and there was certainly chatter about it for a little bit of time. But you think back to like when the first Spider-Man film came out, and then of course the subsequent sequels. Like you couldn't go into a grocery store or turn into a movie theater and be huge posters and standees. I mean, it was just like it was a literal event that was sort of chasing you every single place you went. And
Oh yeah. Yep.
again, maybe a lot of that, of course, is because times have changed and nothing is sort of as colossal as it once was. But it sort of just illustrates what a moment in time these films were, and how, I mean, they really did capture the public's imagination. I mean, not to say No Way Home didn't, but you sort of compare it with again, even like the first Batman film, or even to some extent the Dark Knight. Like there's just something about these movies and their time and place, and maybe that's again a lot of it. Just the timing has to be right, but certainly our attention spans and sort of our access to information is much different today, where pretty much you can pull up your phone and you can see 30 different movie trailers inside of a minute if you want to. And
Yeah, right.
the magazines aren't as widely circulated, if at all. So there's definitely a change in sort of the appreciation, or the tangibility, I guess might be the word, for that. But, needless to say, when you see, people lining up still to go see a film like, that came out over 20 years ago, and, it's a theater is half full, and it's, pulling in, $2 million. I mean, that one, I think probably speaks to the public's craving for sort of something old made new again. But then there's just that, again, that word again, the nostalgia, where just people are sort of drawn to something that kind of represented a different point in time. And
Yep.
It's truly magical. You can't really put a finger on it, put a word on it, just other than to say it's a magical experience, and it's why we go to the movies. I mean, you said it much more eloquently than I'm saying it right now, but I co-sign that entirely. It's why this show exists, because it's all for the love of movies. So I truly respect that, and it's very near and dear to my heart. So I thank you for that. But JJ, this was a blast. I want to thank
Yeah.
you for coming on the show and talking about your love of Spider-Man. Before I let you swing out of here, where can people stalk you? And I mean that in the best possible way on social media.
You can find me on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter.
Always.
The account for the show is at Spider-Man Books. My personal account is at For Comic Junkies. That's FOR Comic Junkies. Um, and you can also email me spidermanbookclub@gmail.com. Yeah, I'm always on there, like, doom scrolling as they call it, but always willing to talk Spider-Man or comics or movies. Stuff that I just get really excited about. It's funny because I saw, you know, the trailer for like Transformers One. I'm barely a Transformers fan. I like the movies and stuff. Liked the toys a little bit as a kid, and I think that movie looks like a blast, and I'm super excited for it. Um, Meanwhile, same day I'm watching the trailer for Joker. Super excited for that movie. It's you know. So you're gonna find all sorts of eclectic tastes if you follow me.
Well, everyone, please be sure to follow him on Twitter and the like, and give us a like and a follow and subscribe to his podcast. They do a great job over there, especially if you are a Spider-Man fan. I think this is certainly a platform you want to be checking out because not only do they talk about a lot of great Spider-Man stories, but there's a real passion for everyone's favorite web swinger. So definitely check that out. And of course, would love for you to follow this show and the like. All the information on the show notes or all the social media platforms will be in the show notes. Of course, would encourage you to rate and review this podcast, like and subscribe on YouTube. And that does it for me today. Want to again thank JJ for being a part of the show. I'm sure I'll have you back at some point, and we can talk some more Spider-Man movies or another topic if you'd like. But certainly appreciate
Sure.
you being on the show today. But that does it for now, everybody. Thanks as always for tuning in or watching the show. I'll be back next week, and we will certainly do this all over again for the love of movies.